Welcome to Cooking for Health. I'm Dr. Mary DiBartolo, Professor of Nursing at Salisbury University. And here we are at Mac Incorporated, the beautiful kitchen of Mac Incorporated, and I'm here with Katie Dorsch. Katie, you're a dietitian at Atlantic General Hospital. Welcome back. We've done many of these programs together.
Yes, happy to be back.
And I know we're going to take a different tack today. We usually have done seasonal type shows. This time, it was your idea. I think it's a great idea, cooking on a budget, which is important anytime, but especially now because it seems like prices have really gone up at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So you have two delicious recipes for us that can be done on a budget.
Yeah. So I think a really important topic for right now. You're right. Things have gotten so expensive at the grocery store. We really need to stretch those dollars as much as we can. So I have a couple of recipes using some cheaper ingredients. So you can see already there's a lot of cabbage piled up here. It's cheap. You get a lot out of it. It lasts a long time in the fridge. So we're going to feature that in two recipes actually today. And then we'll talk a little bit about spices and how to, find those on a budget, some substitutions, or things you can leave out that aren't entirely necessary, and hopefully have a couple good budget-friendly meals.
Very good. What's our first dish?
So first we're going to make a barbecue beef and cabbage skillet. So we're going to use just a half pound of ground beef. And of course we're kind of bulking up this dish a little bit with our cabbage, which is much cheaper than our ground beef. So to start, we are going to turn on our burner here and get it warmed up. And we're going to brown the ground beef and cook that through until it's no longer pink.
Of course, that's some healthy olive oil there, I see.
Yep, so a little drizzle of olive oil. Of course, olive oil is the most expensive oil in the grocery store, that extra virgin olive oil.
We use a lot of that in our house. I'm married to an Italian, and of course he commented just the other day on how the price has gone up. So you're only using a little bit.
Yeah, we're using a little bit. Certainly if you didn't have olive oil, you could use something like a canola oil, which is a little bit cheaper, just less flavorful. So that's a good option there. So also in our dish today, we're going to get those barbecue flavors in our ground beef from some canned tomato sauce, and we have some smoked paprika, some garlic powder, and some salt in here that is going to make our kind of barbecue spices. While we're on the subject of spices, they can be very expensive, especially if you don't have a well-stocked spice cabinet in your kitchen. It can cost a lot of money to fill that cabinet up. So one thing I like to do when I'm in the grocery store is I look for, in kind of the international section of the grocery store, this brand of spices called Badia. You can get, these big jars of spices and some smaller jars as well, usually for a couple dollars cheaper than, say, the McCormick brand that you would find in the baking or cooking
Well,
aisle.
at Sam's they sell even larger containers, but I also wonder, don't spices and herbs kind of lose their potency and flavor over time? So I worry about buying a really big container that may not be as fresh at the end of the day. But
that's a great point. Purchasing based on how quickly you're going to go through it. In my house I cook a lot, so we will go through this bottle of garlic pretty quickly and go through things. But if you know you're only going to use a little bit,
get a smaller.
Then getting that smaller bottle is going to be a better investment for you. So I think our skillet has heated up just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and, again, this is just a half pound of ground beef that we're going to put in here. Break that up.
Cabbage has made a comeback, I think, partly because it's used a lot in tacos. When you go to restaurants and they make the soft taco, fish tacos and such. So that's one reason why I bought it, if I make myself tacos at home.
Yeah.
It's just so much of it, and I worry about it going bad. But you said it lasts a long time in the fridge, correct?
It does. So yeah, if you buy a whole head of cabbage, which of course is the cheaper option versus, say, a bag of shredded cabbage or coleslaw mix that you could also get, our head of cabbage is going to be a much better buy. So typically if I'm only using, say, half of it, I'll cut it in half and put the other half in the fridge. That cut half can actually oxidize, so just like how an apple might turn brown if it's exposed to air, so can that cut edge of the cabbage. But if you just cut off that portion that has turned a little bit darker, then you'll see the cabbage is still fresh underneath. So it can last, a couple of weeks in the fridge sometimes if you're not going to use the whole head of cabbage that week. So I think it's a great vegetable to really stretch our budgets. Of course, when we think about cabbage, we think a lot about things like coleslaw and salads and those kinds of things. But there's definitely other uses for it, like in our skillet meal today, in a stir fry. It's even really good just kind of sauteed in a skillet by itself as a side dish. I've really been enjoying that a lot this winter.
And what about red cabbage? That's healthy too, and about the same price, or?
Yep, they're typically about the same price. Obviously, the red cabbage is a different color. It has different
nutrients in it, or?
Yes, anthocyanins is the compound that gives, like, blueberries their blue color and red cabbage the red color.
About ready?
This is about ready. Nice and browned. And this is a lean ground beef that we're using today, so the 93.7. If you weren't a beef eater, you could of course use, say, some ground turkey or ground chicken in place of this. I think would be really good. But this is a lean ground beef. Of course, that's going to be the most expensive, but it is going to be a little bit better for us. And we're only using a half pound here. So that kind of stretches things a little bit. So next we're going to add our onions. So this is just a small onion that's been diced. We're going to add that to our skillet and saute that for just a couple of minutes while it softens up a little bit. And then we'll add some of our cabbage and get that cooking. So you can see this is a big pile of cabbage.
It looks like a lot.
It looks like a lot. But it's going to cook down quite a bit. So same thing like when you cook spinach, how you have kind of this big pile, and the running joke is it ends up being that much.
Right. I cooked a dish with arugula the other night. Same thing. It really cooked down. It looked like I was putting so much in there.
Right. Disappears.
Yeah.
So this is about half a head of cabbage. And the cabbage today at the grocery store was 89 cents a pound. And I think the total cost for my head of cabbage was $2 and some change. A little bit less than $3, which I think is a pretty good value. We're getting 2 meals out of it. So it's going to last us a long time. So this cabbage I have, it's just kind of finely shredded. You can see I did it by hand, just with my knife. If you had, of course, a food processor with a slicing blade, that makes it go a little quicker. But if we're on a budget, a tight budget especially, we might not have a food processor to use to slice this up. So when we get to our next dish with the slaw, I'll show everybody how I slice this by hand. Okay? So we are going to dump all of this cabbage into our skillet.
You need a bigger skillet. Until it cooks down some, I guess, huh? Wow.
And you can see, again, we are overflowing out of our skillet, but it's going to cook down quite a bit. Okay? And we can kind of toss this together. And what we're going to do to help this kind of steam and break down is put a lid on this. So we're going to let that cook down for a few minutes, and then we're going to add our tomato sauce and our spices, and then we're going to top it off with a little bit of cheese at the end.
Sounds good.
Oh, I did forget to add a little bit of water to this dish, and that is going to help the cabbage steam. So we'll kind of let that hang out for a minute, and then we'll toss it and get that cabbage cooked down. So you can see our cabbage has wilted down quite a bit, and is a little bit soft. So we're going to go ahead and add the rest of our ingredients to make this barbecue flavor. So we have our smoked paprika, garlic powder, and some salt. And then we have a little bit of brown sugar. So if you...
Oh, a little sweetness there.
A little
huh?
sweetness like you would
Smoky,
get in a barbecue sauce.
Very nice.
Our can of tomato sauce. And we're going to add a teaspoon of some Dijon mustard.
It's a lot of interesting flavors.
Yes. So we're basically building a barbecue sauce in our skillet. So these are all things that you would find in a bottled barbecue sauce. Of course, if we have some of these pantry staples on hand, it becomes much cheaper to kind of make this sauce in the pan as we go. So we have some Worcestershire sauce and some apple cider vinegar. So a little bit of acid. And
so that was mixed in there, apple cider vinegar and Worcestershire.
And the Worcestershire sauce. So I've noticed lately, especially a lot of things like condiments, like this Worcestershire sauce, A1 steak sauce, bottled dressings, those kinds of things have become quite expensive.
But they do last a long time. Not the dressings, but the Worcestershire sauce.
Sure, yeah. So things like the Worcestershire sauce, our vinegar, our Dijon mustard, those things are going to last us a long time, and we're going to be able to make multiple recipes and dishes with those items. We're also going to top it with some sliced green onions for a little garnish. If you wanted to make it a little spicy, you could maybe add some jalapenos to this, some sliced or diced jalapenos to make it a little more of a spicy dish. If you wanted to bulk it up with a little bit more protein, I think maybe some canned beans would work well here, along with the ground beef, to stretch those dollars even further and get a little more protein out of the dish.
It's reminiscent of our bean show.
Yes, I love beans.
And you're in the bean club.
Me and the Bean Club, still going strong. So yeah, I'm a big fan
What beans would you recommend?
adding beans to this. Really, I think you could go with any kind of bean. Maybe like a pinto bean would be good here with those kind of barbecue flavors, or another small white bean like a navy bean would be good. Yeah, lots of options. So our cheese is nice and melted, you can see.
Oh, I was going to say, don't forget those. I love spring onions.
Yeah, the green onions add just like a nice pop of fresh flavor here.
And some little different color.
Yeah.
It's nice.
So obviously we're just taking some small portions to try, but this dish altogether should serve about 3, maybe 4 people.
And that meets a lot of food groups in that one pan.
It does, yeah.
The vinegar helps give it some flavor too. Mm-hmm. Like a North Carolina barbecue, correct? Has a more vinegary flavor to it.
Could maybe serve some cornbread on the side. So this recipe is actually from a website called Budget Bites, which is a food blog focused on budget-friendly recipes. So at the time the recipe was published, the cost per serving was about $1.73. So it's probably a little bit more these days, closer to $2.
But relative to other things,
correct.
At the present, it would be still budget. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. So we can move on and talk
what's
about
the next item?
Our spicy salmon burgers.
Yum, that sounds great. And salmon's so good for you.
It is. So salmon, it has those omega-3 fatty acids, which are really good for our heart health, our brain health, all kinds of things. So we're all encouraged to eat more salmon or more fatty fish in general. Salmon's really expensive though. If you buy some fresh or even some frozen salmon, you know, you're looking at $15 or so a pound at least. So it can be a little pricey. So I thought I would feature these salmon burgers because we're going to use canned salmon, which is a little more budget friendly. Of course, if you buy the pink salmon, that's kind of the cheapest canned salmon you can buy. You know, that's going to be $4 or $5 a can. You can also find some red sockeye salmon, which is just a pricier salmon. That's going to be a little bit more, but I got 2 cans on sale today, and they were about $5 and some change each. So I thought that was a good deal. So I've already taken the salmon out of the can, so we've drained it just like you would a can of tuna fish. Drained it, and we've you know, kind of flaked it here. Because we want to break up those chunks because we're going to make a patty out of it, kind of like a crab cake. Okay.
I'm sure you have some interesting seasonings to put in there.
We do. So they've got kind of like an Asian flair. They've got some red curry paste that we're going to put in there that's going to give it some spice. And then we have a spicy mayo that we're going to drizzle on top. And then while our salmon patties are actually cooking on the skillet, we're going to make a little slaw to go on the side with some of our leftover cabbage.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So we have our salmon that's already flaked. We're going to add a couple of eggs to this.
More protein to the mix.
More protein, and it's going to help bind them together. Also to bind this together, we have some panko breadcrumbs. So these are a little bit different than just regular breadcrumbs.
I prefer them really. They're lighter
Yeah.
and just tend to not overtake a dish so much.
Right, they're lighter and crispier and kind of these bigger flakes almost. So
And the price is about the same, isn't it, compared to regular bread?
it is. You could certainly also make your own breadcrumbs at home if you have bread that was about to go stale. You can toast it and kind of grind it up. So we are going to kind of beat those eggs and mix in these breadcrumbs. And you can always add a little bit more breadcrumb if your patties aren't holding together well. But we'll start with just about a half a cup. Okay. So then we have to add some seasoning to this. We have, again, a little bit of brown sugar, some garlic powder, and some salt.
I take it you do buy that big thing of garlic.
I do.
We do at our house too. We use a lot of garlic.
Then we're going to add some red curry paste. So this is going to be a little bit spicy. It's got a lot of seasonings and flavors in it as well. So we are going to add...
And curry's quite good for you, isn't it?
It is.
Put in there. Mm-hmm. And we'll post these recipes at the end of the program.
Yes. So we've got a tablespoon of our red curry paste. And then we are going to add a tablespoon of some soy sauce. And then one extra ingredient, this recipe calls for some lemongrass, specifically for lemongrass paste. In some grocery stores you can find it, you know, in the produce aisle by the herbs in kind of a squeeze tube. It can be a little pricey, of course. Anything prepared like that is. At the store today they did have some fresh lemongrass. So I thought I would include that and show everybody just kind of what it is and how to cut it up. So you can see it looks kind of like a green onion almost. but it's a little tougher and woodier. So we are going to cut off the ends. And there's usually kind of a tougher outer layer that's helpful to take off. And then what I do is I normally kind of cut this whole stalk in half. And then we're just going to thinly...
You're quite good with the knife.
Slice it.
I would buy the paste.
Of course, the other option is if you didn't want to buy the lemongrass or the lemongrass paste, or you couldn't find either of those, then we can just leave it out. So the beauty of curry paste is that it does have some lemongrass in there.
Oh, okay. So you can't substitute lemon for lemongrass.
Right. It's a little bit different. So I think it's easier just to leave it out if you don't have it or don't want to get it. So we are going to throw that in there. And then mix everything together.
I have never made anything like this, so I'm excited to try it.
So you can see it, you know, as we're stirring things together, it looks like it's going to hold together pretty well once we actually form it into patties. It's kind of forming clumps as we're stirring. So that's a good sign that we have enough egg and enough panko in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a skillet nice and hot and ready, and we're just going to cook these in the skillet, a few minutes on each side. Remember, our salmon is already cooked, so we just need to kind of warm it through. Okay, so now that we've mixed our salmon together, we're just going to shape them into patties. I like to kind of pat everything down in the bowl and then kind of divide it into roughly 4 sections, so that I know I'm getting fairly even portions. And just like how you would make a hamburger or a crab cake, that kind of thing, we're just going to form it into these patties.
The other kind of cake I'm interested in making, and if you have the fresh fish, is codfish cakes.
Oh, yeah.
Cod's very good for you. I grew up in Baltimore, and they were a big deal up there. So I've been inspired lately to try some codfish cakes.
Try some codfish. Cod is also, it doesn't have the omega-3s like salmon does, but it is a little bit cheaper than salmon, so that's a good thing. So these salmon patties, they could of course be served like a burger on a bun, or today we are going to serve them with this kind of easy slaw on the side, since we have that leftover cabbage. Okay, so we've got 4 good sized patties out of this, and we're just gonna put them in the skillet. And this is just a medium heat. You could also, you know, stick them in the oven, again, like a crab cake.
Kind of broil them? Can you broil
them or bake them if you preferred. Okay. I'm going to go wash my hands and then we'll work on this slaw. All right, so I wanted to show you how I get this cabbage nice and shredded, finely chopped. So I cut my cabbage in half and then cut the core out. And so then we cut each half of the cabbage in half, so we get kind of these wedges. And what I like to do is kind of take out this tough center part, so we just have kind of these relatively flat sections of leaves. So then I start cutting there, and we're just thinly cutting. And of course, we're not going to be able to get it as thin as, say, the food processor or a mandolin.
It's pretty thin though.
Yeah.
Nice.
Takes a little bit of practice sometimes. So it takes a little more time to do it this way, but it is going to save us money. So my suggestion, because this cabbage can oxidize, is only cut up what you need for that particular dish. And then the rest we'll leave as intact as possible for storage.
Do you wrap it in saran wrap?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So then we're left with kind of this awkward middle section, but we're just going to slice that the same way. Just makes it easier to get your knife through if we do it in these sections. I'm trying to deal with kind of a weird shape.
So for people like me that have fear of knives, the shredded cabbage in the bag may be the way to go.
Yeah, you could certainly, you know, they do sell bags of pre-shredded cabbage or coleslaw mix. You could certainly do that if you wanted to. Again, not as budget friendly, but definitely an option. Or if you have that food processor that you can put it through the chute. That's a little safer on your fingers.
Sure.
So we're just going to make kind of an easy, quick slaw to go with this. There's really no recipe. We're just going to drizzle some olive oil in here, kind of the base of any good salad dressing. We're going to add a little bit of vinegar. So we have some fat, we need some acid. Again, we're just kind of eyeballing it. I'm using some rice vinegar here, which I think goes well with our flavors today. And then we're going to add a little bit of salt. So we need some salt. If you think about flavoring dishes, we need some fat, acid, salt, and sweet. Those are kind of our main flavors that we can play around with. Okay. And then we need a little sweet, so we're going to add a little bit of sugar to this too.
Very good. Cooked just right, too. Warmed through nicely. Nice little kick to it with the sauce. Now, this, I imagine, costs a little more to make because of the salmon involved. Even though it is canned salmon, but it's still a very healthy main course.
Right. So, yeah, this is a little more pricey than our skillet meal. But as far as salmon goes, it's kind of a more affordable way to include salmon in your diet. So I thought it would be good to highlight something that's kind of overlooked is that canned fish aisle.
Exactly. I don't think of it much. I mean, I usually see fish on display, and
Right.
it's often very expensive unless you catch it on sale. Yeah.
Exactly. So there we have it. Of course, we have 4 patties, so this should serve about 4 people, or maybe more if you wanted to share a patty, if you had maybe kids at home who didn't need that much. And then our slaw to go with it.
The slaw is very tasty. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for providing these economical recipes that are delicious at the same time. And we will post them at the end of the program.
Yes.
And again, we'd like to thank MAC for having us here today in their kitchen. And we'll be back another time with some other delicious recipes you'll be willing to share.
Looking forward to it.
So thank you for joining us for this edition of Cooking for Health here on PAC 14.